Hello everyone, today I will be servicing a Konica Hexanon AR 50mm f1.4 E-type lens. This lens has a stiff aperture ring, a very tight focus ring, a bit shaky frame, a good amount of dust between the elements, and some haze in the front group. I will be disassembling the lens to clean it up, re-grease the focusing helicoid, and remove the dust and haze from the optics. The first thing I did was to inspect and run technical tests on the lens. I found the lens to be very sharp and as expected, without any decentering or problems in flaring and bokeh. I unscrewed the front plate using a rubber tool, making sure it doesn't come in contact with the front element. Then I removed the rubber seam under it, as well as the rubber from the focusing ring in order to clean it. I applied a drop of acetone on the set screw that keeps the front frame from unscrewing. I'm always very careful with removing set screws as they are very small and they can strip very easily. After removing the screw, the front frame can be unscrewed as well. Next, I removed the front group of the lens and gave it a closer inspection, confirming the large amounts of dust on each bottom element as well as the slight haze in the middle of the group. I've put the group aside for now in order to resume the disassembly. I make a little mark both on the inner and the outer helicoids when the lens is at infinity, which makes life a bit easier when reassembling the lens later. Then I move to the back of the lens, removing the 4 screws from the mount. In this particular lens, there is no need to remove the inner screws from the black part of the mount. The iris ring can be simply lifted up, making sure to store the locking plate and clicking ball away. The back group cannot be removed as one piece on this lens, so I leave it in place because I don't want to expose each of the elements to the environment without a good reason. I continue with removing the 3 screws that secure the focusing ring onto the outer helicoid, paying attention to not move the helicoid, although I already have marked where they should be at infinity, but it's a good practice. Once done, the focusing ring can be simply lifted up. That's when I make another mark, this time in the front side of the outer helicoid at infinity for my convenience. I also measure and note down the distance between the back of the lens and the outer and inner helicoids. Strictly speaking, this is not necessary, but it's always good to have confirmation when reassembling the lens. Next, I remove the helicoid key by unscrewing the 2 screws that secure it. Now the helicoids are completely free to decouple. I slowly remove the inner helicoid, paying attention to my original mark and where exactly it will decouple from the outer helicoid. This is the most crucial part of this process, as missing the decoupling point can add a lot of extra time of trial and error in order to find the perfect point that the lens focuses to infinity. So I make a narrow shaped mark at the exact point. Next, I remove the outer helicoid. Although I already have its measurement with the caliper and it only has one entry point, I still think it's a good practice to also mark where it decouples, which makes life easier on reassembly. I then start cleaning the 3 parts of the focusing helicoid. I usually use my ultrasonic cleaner for this job, but since these were actually already very clean, I decided to do it by hand. I use lighter fluid to clean the old grease and ethyl alcohol to clean the rest of the parts, such as the engravings. At this point, I also clean the dust that has accumulated through the years on the element of the back group that was directly behind the iris, making sure I leave no smudges or big particles of dust behind. Then I start the reassembly of the lens by applying grease to the focusing helicoid. Knowing this lens and its helicoid, I only apply grease to one of the parts because I know that is enough to give a good feel without any gaps or becoming too heavy. I test that in practice and also measure the distance with my caliper to make sure it sits at the correct distance. In the case of the inner helicoid though, I apply grease both to the inner part of the outer helicoid and the inner helicoid because the gap within the helicoids is larger and it has to be fitted with grease in order to make sure there are no gaps. I then insert the helicoid key and test whether the lens is sturdy or it has any shake. This is particularly important for filmmaking, as any shake here means the image can jump when changing focus direction. I can feel a bit of shake, so I took off the key and made the necessary corrections in order to make sure there is no shake in the lens. Through decades of usage, the edges of the key can get worn, which is why the lens was shaky to begin with. Some brands of lenses have helicoid keys that are like forks and can be bent and readjusted for this reason, but this is not the case for this lens. One of the industry standard ways is the little hack of adding a tiny bit of width to the key by expanding the metal. This has to be done to very small increments and trial and error, as it's much harder to make the key's width shorter again. I've started with simply pressing the key with a pair of pliers, but since this wasn't enough, I had to resort to the more aggressive way, which is to hit the edges of the key, slightly expanding the metal and increasing the width. I test for shake both at infinity, mid and close focus and confirm there is no shake on the lens. I take off the helicoid key one last time to apply some slightly thicker grease in order to guarantee a smooth focusing experience. I then apply both thread lock as I screw in the screws and UV glue to the top of the screws. This extends the tolerance of the lens to hard focusing actions, something very important for filmmaking. I continue with adding the iris ring after applying the appropriate amount of grease for a pleasant clicking feel, making sure the locking button has the correct orientation. Finally, I put the mount on top, applying thread lock on the screws. Now I can resume the work in the front part of the lens. First, I will put back the focusing ring onto the focusing helicoid. The screws are full of old thread locks, so I take my time to clean them. Then I put them in place, making sure the helicoid is about at infinity. I'm not worried about precision at this point, as I will calibrate the exact infinity later. I test the focusing fill once again, making sure everything is light, smooth and without any significant shake. Then I'm going to work on cleaning the haze and dust in the front group. I clean the back element in order to have a better view of the situation in the rest of the elements inside. I apply a little of acetone on the thread lock that secures the retaining ring which locks the back element in place. Then I put a pair of gloves with higher grip and I use a lens wrench in order to unlock the ring. Just a little turn is enough, and then I resume by unscrewing the rest of the ring by hands in order to eliminate any risks associated with holding a metallic tool near optics. Now the back element can be simply lifted up. Inspecting it, I can confirm the slight haze on the element, which looks of the removable kind. Lighter fluid is very good for cleaning up elements with haze. I do this into two passes, the cleaning and the finish. During the first pass, I add plenty of lighter fluid and I clean the element thoroughly, making sure any kind of grease and haze is cleaned up. While the good amount of lighter fluid is necessary for the cleaning, it doesn't evaporate as fast, so it often leaves streaks on the element. So, in the second pass, I repeat the process, but this time with a much smaller amount of lighter fluid. In this case, as I slide the cleaning paper on top of the element, it removes any streaks and pushes any dust particles away from the element. This leaves a very clean surface. After putting the element back and inspecting, I repeat a similar process in order to end up with a very clean back side of the element as well. Finally, I put the whole group back into the lens and I do a final inspection to confirm there are no big particles of dust present. At this point, I'm using a special technique in order to calibrate the infinity of the lens in great accuracy and without the need of getting away from my servicing desk. I'm using a film camera with a plate attached on the film plane and a lens that is specially adjusted so it projects at infinity. Then I'm using a modern digital camera with high zooming capabilities and focus carefully through the lens and onto the little plate on the back of the film camera. In this case, I didn't actually need to make any further adjustments on the lens as it hits infinity perfectly. This can be actually done in an even simpler setup using just a lens with confirmed correct infinity and a digital camera, but this setup has a more permanent nature. Perhaps I will make a tutorial in the future about how to make such a setup. After adding some thread lock on the focusing ring screws, I put the focusing rubber band back and I measure the diameter with a caliper. This client has provided me with a CMOS metal focusing gear which I install on the lens.
It's very important, at least for lenses like this, that the focusing ring connects with the helicoid through vertical screws to put the focusing gear from the top. Otherwise, it can result in decoupling the focusing ring or even worse problems. After I give a good cleaning on the front element, I screw in the front frame, securing with each set screw, and put the rubber ring and the name label back in. Finally, I clean up the back element and the mount. Now this lens is ready to be used for a long time with confidence and without any problems. Thank you so much for watching this video. Always remember, do not open up vintage lenses without the proper tools, patience and experience. Lens servicing can be very stressful and traumatic to some extent if an expensive and rare lens gets permanently damaged. There are still many great technicians out there that can get your lens in perfect shape without all the stress and worry, so make sure to consider all the options. Have a great day and see you next time.